Suai everyone, and welcome to World Building with Lazy Pig. In the woodlands of the Bozeriv Republic in the Erziniai Federation, there is a story every child hears at least once. It describes a man named Leo Treshov, who ventured into the forest near his village to hunt, forage, and collect firewood. Unfortunately, his search led him deep into the forest, and night fell before he could find his way home. As he stumbled through the wood, he came upon a dark pool of water and decided to rest beside it. When he went to drink from the pool, he discovered a baby lying in the water, and he quickly scooped up the infant girl, naked and cold, and wrapped her in his coat. Being a good man, Leo Treshov nurtured the infant and gave her a name, Ziokla, for he'd found her in the water. The following day, Leo Treshov made his way through the forest back home, but at the forest line he discovered he could not venture out of the forest with the infant, as if some magic held her within the woods. So he remained in the forest of Ziokla and built a house there, and his family and friends from the village came to visit him with food and supplies. Ziokla grew up healthy and strong, but most interestingly, she discovered she could use magic. Under her guidance and blessing, the crops were fruitful, the bishva'al were plentiful, their hunts were more successful, disease and sicknesses were cured, and many women bore fat babies. Leo Treshov was proud to see how his daughter had grown, but he could not miss how lonely she was, so far from the village, and only visited by those within whenever they wanted to use her magic for their own gain. So Leo Treshov went into the village and looked for any young man who had not gone to Ziokla asking for magic from her. He found Vloy and asked the young man to go to Ziokla and marry her. Vloy agreed, and he left the village the following day. Immediately they fell in love with one another, and by spring they had married. Ziokla's magic was so powerful they were gifted with a daughter by their first anniversary. The moment their daughter was born, Ziokla felt free, and so they named their child Ome. The next day, Ziokla went out to the edge of the forest to call to her father in the village, but when she reached the tree line, she found she did not feel constrained. So she went beyond the tree line, and all the way to the village to find her father, who was alarmed to see she could now leave the forest. They quickly returned to the woodland home to inform Vloy of the miracle, who was pleased to learn Ziokla could now leave the forest. The next days were spent in bliss, until after the next hunt Ziokla had been asked to bless. The hunters came back empty-handed. All other hunts Ziokla blessed were the same, and the crops she blessed did not bear fruit, and the diseases and illnesses she tried to cure did not heal. And so even the pregnant women hid from her, for fear she would curse their babies. Vloy was happy to learn Ziokla could no longer use magic, but Ziokla was afraid the villagers would be angry, and she took Ome from their home to flee from the forest. Instead, she discovered her daughter could not leave the woods, just as she had not been able to leave the woods. Vloy told her this was a comfort from the villagers, who would wait for the blessings of their daughter when her magic grew. In the meantime, he insisted Ziokla go to the village to work, while he stayed with Ome in their home. Reluctantly, Ziokla agreed, and so she worked while Vloy raised Ome in the forest, where she too developed magical abilities. When Ome reached the age to marry, her father went to the village and he found for Ome a suitable husband, and when she had her first child with her husband, Ome found she too could leave the forest as her mother had before her, but at the cost of her magical abilities. This story is called The Woodland Child, and scholars believe it was originally told by a man who had a lover leave their illegitimate child in the woods for him to find and bring back to the village without repercussions for having a child outside of wedlock. Over time, it was expanded upon into a magical fable told to children. Now it is used to explain a custom which has spread throughout all of the woodland region of Bozeriv. In the woodlands, including the capital city of Vish, girls after the age of 15 must wear something from the forest such as wooden jewelry. However, the most common item worn is a veil made from a fiber from the Sranzlevov tree. It is thought that carrying the forest with them will keep their magic, which is allowing their bodies to mature into women able to bear children and survive childbirth, from fleeing for the forests, since the magic girls possess is drawn to the surrounding trees. They can't wear metal either, since metal is seen as having a negative effect on magic. Any girl who doesn't follow these two traditions risks losing her magic and thus not maturing properly. Worst of all, she may be barren or only have stillborn babies, or might even die in childbirth. But girls face other expectations growing up. Since they're supposed to be the head of the house and the primary or only income provider, they must acquire a good education. Thus, most girls attend all-girls schools to avoid any distractions from making the most of their education. And wealthy girls will be tutored at home, probably by a family member, but it could be a teacher from the outside. The wearing of the veil is seen as odd by those living outside the region, since veils in the rest of the country signify someone who is ashamed to show their face. These girls aren't ashamed. Rather, they're instructed to protect the sacred magic within them, and they must do this until they reach sexual maturity, thus of the age to marry. At this point, the young woman will find one of the many shrines placed within the woods, and she'll pray for an entire day to Korthovar, asking for his strength and guidance. Then she will take leaves from the Sranzlevov tree, dab them in dry, ground pigment, and press them to her skin. After a few minutes, she'll take the leaves off, and a stain will have been left on her skin in the shape of the leaf and color of the pigment she had chosen. Over time, the stain will fade, but it will take several days to disappear completely. It is believed that the shape of the stain tricks the magic within her to follow the stain back into the forest. When it finally has vanished, the woman will be considered magic-free and an adult ready to marry. Magic while growing up is good for girls, but it's considered harmful to babies, especially baby boys. It's important she rids her body of the magic before she marries and becomes pregnant. Otherwise, she risks miscarriage, stillbirths, and harmful mutations on her children. At this time, she doesn't have to wear the veil anymore, because she no longer needs magic, but most women will until they have their first child. Forests in Bozeriv are considered magical places, because they're filled with magical trees, which is why churches in the region are built to resemble the forest when inside them. It is also why there are paths woven throughout the forest outside of the many villages, towns, and cities of the region, and along the paths are shrines, meant for the prayers of young women. But these shrines are used for other prayers, and someone might pray at them for any number of reasons, like wishing for health, or wealth, or even for their favorite Baza team to win the tournament. Around the capital of Vish, there is a path so long and with so many shrines, it is believed that praying at each shrine along the path will bring a person's subconscious to the empty. Even a glimpse of the empty in life is said to help the dead to find their way through the empty to heaven. So many Bozerivo people will pilgrimage to Vish just to walk the path of shrines, and hopefully glimpse the empty along the way. After completing this rite, women will marry, and after their first child is born, they typically remove their veils. And girls and women aren't the only ones who face restrictions in this region. Men also do, but only after their first child is born. At this point, the husband must wear a piece of the forest while he is staying home to raise the infant. His education growing up wasn't deemed as important as the girls in his family, and so he spent a great deal of time at home, learning all he could about babies from raising his younger siblings and helping to keep the home clean and fixing things around the house alongside his father. After his first child reaches adulthood, a man no longer has to wear a piece of the forest anymore. Men don't wear the forest piece to keep their magic from fleeing because the purpose of their magic is to feed babies, and it won't leave so long as there are babies around, or will be, to feed. Wearing the forest piece for men is a show of solidarity and fealty to their wives, enduring for as long as their wives had to endure. In fact, in the case of the veil, they'll usually wear the last veil their wives were wearing before their first child was born. This veil is customarily displayed in the house when it is no longer in use, proving to everyone who visits the home the perseverance of its owners. Of course, men aren't allowed to wear metal so long as they're having children, because they need their magic to remain strong enough throughout the nursing of their children. The custom of wearing a piece of the forest goes beyond just protecting magic or showing solidarity. It's meant to teach men and women their roles in society and help them dedicate themselves to keeping the family unit functioning properly. The first child is a test, and if the parents aren't able to focus on their dedication to these duties, then they're discouraged by family and friends from having more children. Those who are wearing the forest piece are called woodland women or woodland men, and to live in the woodlands is what people call this period of a person's life. Newlyweds are called woodland couples, and a woodland child is the firstborn of the family, regardless of gender. Leaving the woodlands is meant to refer to the prayer ceremonies of women who are shedding their magic, but it can also mean to reach adulthood or to accomplish something significant. Many popular names come from the woodland child story, including Ilotresha and Vlai for men and boys, and Ziokraye and Omem for women and girls. There are many questions from those outside the Bozerive Republic regarding the tradition, as I find it all rather strange. One of the most common questions is, what happens if the wife is barren, or if the husband is sterile? Will they remain in the woodlands forever? Unfortunately, while a man being sterile is seen as simply unfortunate, a woman is usually blamed if she is barren, because it is assumed she must have forgotten to wear the forest piece, or she wore metal. But the answer given to outsiders is always, they will adopt a child, as Leo Treshov adopted Ziokla. Because even a barren woman is seen as a sign from Korthavar to mean she was meant to adopt a child into her home, it is assumed Korthavar must have allowed her to forget, or allowed her to fall for temptation, or be tricked into wearing a metal piece. So while women are blamed, they are also excused, under the same excuse for why a man would be sterile. It's the will of Korthavar. Another question frequently asked is, what if they don't want children? Well, then they will be encouraged to have them, of course. But even in Bozerive, they accept some people aren't good parents, and not wanting children is a decent sign someone wouldn't be fit for the role. So the real answer is, they will wait a year after their marriage, and then the wife will leave the woodlands and the husband will enter it, for it is only fair he spend as much time in the woodlands as she did. Of course there is the question, what if they're both men, or both women? What will they do then? And they'd answer the same as the first question. They will adopt a child, as Leo Treshov adopted Ziokla. And they'll add, and one of them will be a woodland man, while the other will leave the woodlands. Regardless of circumstances, the tradition is adhered to as closely as it can be, because it still serves the purpose of dedicating the family to the raising of children, and same-sex couples helps reduce the amount of orphaned or fostered children burdening the church. And that's just one story from Erziniai, and hopefully I'll be able to share more stories with you soon. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and join me on Patreon and Twitter, where you can see information about upcoming videos. If you saw something or heard something you'd like to know more about, leave a comment below. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. O Zefith Rach!